When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
So good, so good, so good.
Just in, thousands of winter arrivals at your Nordstrom Rack store. Save up to 70% on coats, slippers, and cashmere from Kate Spade, New York, Vince, UGG, Levi's, and more.
Check out these boots.
They've got the best gifts.
My holiday shopping hack? Join the Nordy Club.
Get an extra 5% off every Rack purchase with your Nordstrom credit card. Plus, buy it online and pick it up in-store the same day for free. Big gifts, big perks. That's why you Rack.
The last show with David Cooper. Procrastinate your life away with us.
When you dig up old soil in a waterfront, you might not expect to find much, but in fact, soil like that can be teeming with life, ready to spring into action at any minute. I am here with someone who recently analyzed soil in the Toronto waterfront and found worms, fleas, larvae, plankton, things ready to come back to life at any minute. I'm sure I described this science story slightly wrong, but she'll correct me. Her name is Dr. Shelby Riskin, and she is an ecology and evolutionary biology professor at University of Toronto. Shelby, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
I buried the lead. And I know I said I wouldn't bring up your husband. Actually, I didn't say that. You are married to a great friend of the show, Dan Riskin, and I just want to know one embarrassing fact about him, and then we'll get to this story.
Oh, gosh. One embarrassing fact about him.
Does he have smelly feet?
You know, he doesn't have smelly feet. He gets a lot of belly button lint. Is that a good embarrassing fact?
That is actually a very good one. I'm going to figure out a way to use that against him. Let's talk about what you found in the soil. But first, what do you expect to find when soil in a waterfront, like on Lake Ontario, one of the Great Lakes, what do you expect to find when it gets dug up?
Well, I mean, the story is a little bit one of accidental discovery, because what made us start looking in the soil was not actually what might come back to life in terms of animal life, but plant life. So the mouth of the Don River, this big river that cuts through the center of Toronto, was filled in the late 1800s. And this project, they've recently been digging it out, and they removed 7 meters of fill from this, previously industrial area to try to make a more natural river mouth, reduce flooding there. And when they got down about 7 meters, they hit a soil that looked a little different than what was on top, and native plants started sprouting, cattails and bulrushes. And the construction workers actually called halt on the construction and the excavation because they thought this was so unusual.
Good on them. I feel like sometimes construction companies are like, "Oh yeah, don't say what amazing things we found because that'll pause the job."
Absolutely. And they did pause it. It was paused for a month or perhaps a little longer. And that's when they let us, a team of researchers from U of T, dig up these big bins of soil and take them to the greenhouse. And so our initial work was trying to see if we could excavate seeds and pollen from the soils and get plants to grow, to kind of show that those plants that spontaneously started growing were 100-plus-year-old seeds that had been buried for more than a century. It was hard to get those plants to grow. I have yet to, have a seed in my hand, put it in soil, and watch it sprout. That doesn't mean that those plants weren't spontaneous from these old soils. But what we eventually did is we took some kind of interior soil samples and put them in water tanks. It used to be a thriving wetland along this kind of mouth of the river. And that's when we saw all of this animal life emerge really quickly. So we had, these little water fleas swimming around. We had lots of larvae and worms munching around. Algae was growing, diatoms. The tanks kind of made their own little contained ecosystems really quickly.
It's kind of like sea monkeys, right? Like it's just
totally.
Life hanging out there with just in stasis, basically. And you add a little water, you mix it around, boom, you got all this stuff that you didn't think was there. Is this unusual? Is it unusual for life, like worms and things, to just, sleep for hundreds of years under the soil?
It's not unusual for a lot of microbes and very small organisms and animals to have some form of diapause or some form of dormancy for a long period of time. But this was especially a long period of time, and especially because the ecosystem was so altered on top of it. In some ways, it made a perfect storage container. It was dark, it was anoxic, it was cool under, all of these meters of fill. And that's what kind of makes it an extra cool story. It's a little bit like reviving an old ecosystem, a whole kind of system that was, buried. But it isn't unusual for, especially what's beyond the scope of our human vision, what's kind of microscopic in the soil, to turn off and on now and then in ecosystems.
Well, a well-known evolutionary biologist was quoted as saying, it's hard not to get really excited about this. That person, of course, was you. Why is this so exciting to take, soil that was destroyed kind of by humans, putting stuff on top of it to wreck a river hundreds of years ago? You get rid of that, and then boom, you got this old life coming back to life. Why is this so exciting?
Well, I like this story for a million reasons, but one that kind of gets what you're asking at is that humans have altered the planet in so many destructive ways. And urbanization, this kind of growth of cities, is one that's been particularly damaging to a lot of native biodiversity around the world, including in Toronto. We try to regreen areas or build kind of artificial wetlands and artificial ecosystems in our backyards and in our parks and recreate green space so that we get some amount of, the ecosystem services that green space provides, and also a place for biodiversity to thrive. But this shows an ecosystem that was damaged and destroyed. And when it was, exposed to water and air and sunlight, it just was able to turn back on. It wasn't actually, so degraded as to be unlivable. As Jeff Goldblum says, life always finds a way. It just is, to me, a real story of resilience. And that makes it really exciting. In the pollen record, we did find 2 tree species represented that are extinct in the city now. They're not extinct in the world. One almost is. But so there also was kind of evidence of what the ecosystem of Toronto used to be like prior to, our urban expansion and human impact. And I think that makes it cool too, what it was like before today, before skyscrapers and concrete.
So it's one part history lesson, like what the river used to look like, and it's one part a little bit of comfort knowing that if we kind of had destroyed certain wetlands in the past, we may be able to revitalize them and bring back the original species that live there a little easier than we thought.
I think that is a really cool piece of it. We don't usually think about keeping the soil intact that was once in an ecosystem that's become degraded. We usually, especially in a place where there might have been pollution or something, we often dig that soil out, throw it away, and put in clean fill or clean, basically potting soil. And I think sometimes maybe we're missing then, this microscopic layer that makes an ecosystem, or can build and help an ecosystem thrive. So I do think there's potential there for using native soils and native microbiota, not just native plants and things like that, to restore ecosystems and restore function.
Well, you quoted Jeff Goldblum as Dr. Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park saying life finds a way. My favorite quote from that movie was, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Aren't you worried you might reanimate some deadly worm that, could kill all of humanity?
Cool question. I'm not. I mean, this ecosystem was, one of the largest wetland complexes in Canada. It was 5 kilometers along the shores of Lake Ontario. It supported, fish nurseries, bird populations, a lot of native plant populations. And it is, to me, much more a story of restoring functionality that we've lost rather than potentially exposing biodiversity that we weren't expecting.
I agree. It was a silly question, but I am worried when they reanimate life from hundreds of thousands of years ago in the Antarctic, like ice. That's when I start to get scared.
Totally. And we have, I mean, microbes are turning on because of, melting permafrost and stuff. And that is interesting. This, I think, is unlikely. Although I will say that one of the initial reasons that they filled in this area is the ecosystem was already kind of degraded. People in Toronto in the late 1800s were, dumping sewage right into the lake, and there was a cholera outbreak. So part of the initial filling in was driven by, disease.
Wanting to protect us from cholera. All right,
Yeah.
fine. We'll give our ancestors a break, I guess, a little bit. Well, Dr. Shelby Riskin is an ecology and evolutionary biology professor at the University of Toronto. Shelby, it was a great pleasure having you on the show, and it was very nice to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.